7 decades dedicated to music, over 65 studio albums, hundreds of songs recorded, and millions of fans all over the world. All of those monumental numbers were achieved by a man who spent his entire life relying on 2 crutches. Among a sea of titles, only one nickname could ever truly capture the man: the voice with a heart. This is the extraordinary story of Mac Wiseman and how numbers can never measure the true size of a great heart. To truly find the source of that voice, to understand its profound warmth and its gentle wisdom, you have to travel back to a place and time where music wasn't just entertainment. It was a part of everyday life, as essential as conversation. Malcolm Bell Wiseman was born on May 23, 1925, in the rural community of Cremora, deep within Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. His life was cruelly and intensely altered before he could form his first memory. At just 6 months old, he was struck by poliomyelitis, a disease that left him with a permanently weakened right leg. For the rest of his life, a crutch would be his constant companion. This physical limitation fundamentally shaped his inner world. While other children ran freely through the valley, Mac's world was often confined to his front porch. This enforced isolation made him a quiet observer of a life he could not fully join. However, this solitude did not curdle into bitterness. Instead, the physical world that was closed off to him was replaced by the expansive universe of sound. His family's phonograph and battery-powered radio became his portals to the world. He spent countless hours mesmerized by the 78 RPM records of his first teachers. He studied the mournful, rambling freedom in the blue yodels of Jimmie Rodgers and absorbed the stoic, plain-spoken grace of the Carter family, whose songs told the stories of the life he saw around him. On clear nights, the radio brought the distant, crackling broadcasts of the Grand Ole Opry from Nashville into his home. For young Mac, music became his escape and his salvation. The profound loneliness of his early years was not a handicap, but a crucible, forging within him a deep, empathetic connection to the human condition that would one day pour out through his own magnificent, compassionate voice. Indeed, by the time he was 12 in 1937, that voice was beginning to emerge from the shadow of his heroes as he sang at local gatherings. Even as his confidence grew, his physical limitations remained a constant barrier, making stage performance a challenge. Unable to be a dynamic showman, he did what he had always done. He turned his limitation into a strength. He focused on perfecting the one instrument that needed no legs to travel, dissecting the phrasing and breath control of his heroes on the radio with a professional's ear. He mastered the art of conveying a lifetime of emotion in a single note, becoming not a dancer or an acrobat, but something far more enduring, a master craftsman of the human voice. In 1943, Mac Wiseman graduated from New Hope High School. The world outside the Shenandoah Valley was engulfed in flames. Young men from every corner of the country, including his own small town, were being called to serve, to fight in the great, terrible conflict of the Second World War. But Mac was not among them. His lifelong battle with polio, the ailment that had defined his childhood, now defined his young adulthood by exempting him from military service. Whilst his peers and friends went off to become soldiers, sailors, and airmen, he was left behind. It was a strange and deeply complicated feeling. He was safe from the horrors of war, but he was also, once again, an outsider. In his autobiography, he would recall a powerful sense of being excluded, separated from the defining generation-forging experience of his peers. This feeling, however, didn't defeat him. It didn't lead to self-pity. Instead, it solidified a quiet, unshakable resolve that had been building in him for years. If he couldn't prove his worth on the battlefield, he would prove it on the stage. If he couldn't serve his country with a rifle, he would serve it with a song. Music would be his service, his contribution, his way of making his mark on a world that had, in so many ways, tried to count him out. That quiet resolve did not wait long to be put into action. A year later, in 1944, he took his first real professional step into that world. He joined a band called the Cumberland Mountain Folks, led by the powerful and influential singer Molly O'Day. He wasn't the front man, not the star attraction. He was the bass player, a steady rhythmic anchor in the background. It was a humble start, but it was a professional start. It was his first time on the road, his first time earning a wage for playing music. At the same time, he took a job that would prove just as formative. He became a radio DJ, first at his local station, WSVA in Harrisonburg, and later at the influential powerhouse WBT in Charlotte, North Carolina. This was a different kind of education. He was learning how the music industry worked from the other side of the microphone. He learned what songs connected with people, how to craft a compelling set, how to speak to an unseen audience and make them feel like a friend. He was learning the business of music, not just the art of it, gaining insights that would prove invaluable in the decades to come. But his true university years, his postgraduate studies in the art form that would define his life, were about to begin. In 1946, he got a call that would change everything. He was invited to join the band of the man who was, quite literally, inventing a new genre of American music. He packed his bags and went to Nashville to become one of Bill Monroe's bluegrass boys. Working with the notoriously demanding, fiery, and brilliant father of bluegrass was an intense, immersive education. Monroe was a titan, a musical visionary who demanded nothing less than absolute perfection from the musicians who shared his stage. The tours were grueling, the pay was often meager, and the musical standards were stratospheric. It was in this high-pressure environment that Mac's voice truly found its place. He wasn't a gritty, bluesy singer like Monroe. He was a pure tenor, his voice a smooth, clean ribbon of sound that seemed to float effortlessly, soaring above the frantic, driving energy of Monroe's mandolin, Earl Scruggs's revolutionary banjo, and Chubby Wise's wailing fiddle. He learned precision, the art of complex harmony, and the discipline of blending his voice into a sound that was greater than the sum of its parts. His clear, articulate delivery became a hallmark of the classic bluegrass sound, the perfect soaring counterpoint to Monroe's earthy, high, lonesome wail. After his formative time with Monroe, he made another pivotal move. He joined the new group formed by Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs, the Foggy Mountain Boys. Flatt and Scruggs had just made the controversial decision to leave Bill Monroe, taking their smoother, more accessible style with them. By joining them, Mac was placing himself at the very epicenter of the birth of modern bluegrass. He was there for the genesis, learning from the absolute masters of the craft as they created the sound that would captivate the world. This entire period was a crucible. On the surface, he was a sideman, a supporting player to some of the biggest names in the genre. But beneath his quiet, professional exterior, a powerful ambition was taking shape. He was absorbing everything, the music, the business, the performance. He was perfecting his high, clear vocal delivery, a technique that required incredible breath control and pitch-perfect accuracy. He was honing the tools he would need to finally step out on his own. He rarely spoke of the internal pressures of being a sideman, of the burning desire to have his own name on the record label. He was waiting for his moment, patiently sharpening the one weapon his polio could never touch, that voice, that incredible, heartfelt voice, which was now ready to tell its own stories. The apprentice was ready to become a master, but mastery required a stage of his own. The apprenticeship was over. By 1951, after years spent as a vital but often unheralded apprentice in the workshops of giants, Mac Wiseman was ready. He had served his time, paid his dues, and absorbed every lesson the road and the stage could teach him. He had stood shoulder to shoulder with the architects of bluegrass, contributing his flawless tenor to the very blueprint of the genre. But he had learned everything he could from the masters. Now he believed it was time to have his own name on the record label and to tell his own stories. Stepping away from the relative security of established, star-making bands like the Foggy Mountain Boys was a monumental leap of faith. The post-war music scene was a bustling, crowded arena filled with hungry young artists vying for the public's attention. To succeed, he needed more than just talent. He needed a unique identity and a platform to be heard. He found that platform in an unlikely place. Instead of courting the established major labels in Nashville, like RCA Victor or Decca, he signed with Dot Records, a young, ambitious independent label founded in Gallatin, Tennessee, by a man named Randy Wood. This was a gamble for both parties. For Wood, Wiseman was a respected musician within the industry, but an unknown quantity as a solo headliner. For Wiseman, Dot was a small operation without the promotional muscle of the major players, but what they shared was a mutual belief in the power of a good song, honestly delivered. This partnership wasn't about fitting into the Nashville machine, it was about building something new from the ground up. In the spring of 1951, Mac Wiseman stepped into the studio as the master of his own session for the first time. The song he chose for his debut single was a masterstroke of self-awareness. It was called "'Tis Sweet to Be Remembered." The song was not a rowdy, beer-soaked honky-tonk number designed to shake the dance floors, nor was it a lightning-fast instrumental breakdown meant to showcase virtuosic picking. It was a gentle, deeply nostalgic ballad, its melody steeped in the parlor songs of a bygone era. The lyrics spoke of a universal human desire to leave a mark, to be held fondly in the memory of others after you're gone. When Mac sang it, something magical happened. His clear, pure, and unaffected tenor was the perfect vessel for the song's sentiment, carrying a straight-from-the-heart sincerity that was impossible to fake. It was the voice of a trusted friend reminiscing on a quiet evening, a sound that cut through the noise and bravado of the era and spoke directly to the listener's soul. The public, weary of post-war uncertainty and hungry for something genuine, was utterly captivated. "'Tis Sweet to Be Remembered" became a runaway success. It climbed the charts and sold over 1 million copies, a staggering achievement for a debut single, especially on an independent label. Mac Wiseman had not just arrived. He had announced himself as a major new force in country music. His voice, so long a supporting instrument that beautifully complemented others, was now the main event. And it was a voice unlike any other. It didn't have the rugged, world-weary edge of Ernest Tubb or the raw, high, lonesome cry of Bill Monroe. It was a voice of warmth, clarity, and profound empathy. He followed up his initial success with a steady stream of hits that cemented his place in the hearts of the American public. He had an uncanny ability to pick songs that perfectly suited his persona, songs that told stories with a beginning, a middle, and an end. In 1955, he tapped into a massive cultural phenomenon. Walt Disney's television series about the American frontiersman Davy Crockett had become a national obsession. The country was swept up in a craze for coonskin caps and tales of the wild frontier. Several artists rushed to record the Ballad of Davy Crockett, but Mac Wiseman's version became the definitive country rendition. It climbed to number 10 on the Billboard country charts and became another million seller. The song showcased his remarkable skill as a storyteller. It wasn't a deeply personal ballad, but he delivered the narrative with such conviction and clarity that he made the larger-than-life legend feel human and relatable. It proved he could do more than just sing with heart. He could capture the spirit of the times. As the 1950s rolled on, Mac continued to craft his unique artistic identity. A Mac Wiseman record became instantly recognizable. His vocal style was a study in elegant restraint. In an era when many singers embellished their performances with dramatic sobs and vocal affectations, Mac sang with a clean, honest purity. His diction was impeccable. Every word was clear. Every story was coherent. He possessed a gentle, natural vibrato that added warmth and emotion without ever sounding forced. He wasn't a vocal acrobat, interested in showing off his range. He was a master interpreter, dedicated to serving the song. The arrangements on his records were often sparse and tasteful, built around the gentle rhythm of his guitar and the sympathetic backing of a small group. The focus was always, rightfully, on the voice and the story. He released another of his signature songs, the charming and poignant Jimmy Brown the Newsboy. On the surface, it was a simple, sentimental story song. But if you listen closer, you can see the echo of Mac's own inner world, a reflection of the solitary boy from Crymora. The song tells the story of a poor, lonely orphan, a little newsboy who is a vital part of the city's life but also fundamentally separate from it. He is an observer, a messenger who delivers the stories of other people's lives, their joys, their sorrows, their triumphs, whilst his own story remains largely unknown. It is impossible not to see a parallel with the boy who was confined to his porch, unable to run and play, who observed the world through the stories and voices coming from the radio. This became a recurring theme in his work. Many of his most beloved songs featured characters who were wanderers, outcasts, orphans, or lonely souls longing for home. Without ever writing a direct, tear-stained confession, Mac was channeling his own deep foundational experience of isolation into his art. He was connecting with millions of people who had never met him, but felt like they understood him implicitly. His voice had a unique and powerful quality. It could sing of profound sadness without a hint of despair, of deep loneliness without a trace of bitterness. It was a voice of quiet resilience, of gentle empathy. It was around this time that the music industry and fans alike began to settle on the perfect description for his unique gift. They started calling him the voice with a heart, a nickname that acknowledged that his appeal came not just from the beauty of his sound, but from the incredible humanity that flowed through it. However, a new and seismic threat emerged on the musical horizon. A raw, rebellious, and electrifying sound called rock and roll was exploding out of the American South, driven by the revolutionary hips of Elvis Presley, the manic piano of Jerry Lee Lewis, and the duck-walking guitar of Chuck Berry. This was more than just a new style of music. It was a cultural earthquake, a generational rebellion that threatened to upend the entire entertainment industry. For the established country music guard in Nashville, this was a terrifying development. It felt like an invasion. Radio stations that had once been loyal to country music began flipping their formats to play the new, exciting sound. Record labels, chasing the money, began pressuring their country artists to sound more like rock and rollers. For traditionalists like Mac Wiseman, it felt like the world was ending. The music that had been his salvation, the music that told the stories of his people and his home, was now in danger of being dismissed as old-fashioned, quaint, and obsolete. But Mac wasn't just a singer. He was a thinker, a strategist, a man who had learned from a young age that you couldn't always control the circumstances of your life, but you could control how you responded to them. He watched with growing alarm as the industry he loved seemed to be losing its confidence, its sense of self. He believed that country music didn't need to become rock and roll to survive. It needed to become more itself. It needed to organize, to unify, and to fight for its place at the table. And so the quiet observer once again became the determined builder. In 1958, he joined with a group of other forward-thinking artists and industry figures, legends like Ernest Tubb and Webb Pierce, to do something unprecedented. They met not as competitors, but as collaborators, united by a common cause. They formed a new organization with a simple but powerful mission: to protect and promote country music. They called it the Country Music Association, or the CMA. This wasn't just another business meeting, it was a council of war. Their goals were ambitious: to create a unified front that could lobby radio stations, to establish a hall of fame to honor the genre's pioneers, and to create a nationally televised awards show that would give country music the same kind of legitimacy and glamour as Hollywood. Mac Wiseman was not only a founding member, he was elected to serve as the organization's very first secretary. It was not a glamorous, spotlight-seeking role. It was a job that required dedication, organization, and a lot of hard work behind the scenes. It was about taking the minutes, handling the correspondence, and doing the essential, often thankless organizational grunt work that turns a grand idea into a functioning reality. Mac, taking on this role, spoke volumes about his character. He wasn't seeking personal glory. He was seeking to build and protect the community. This was the ultimate expression of the boy who had once felt excluded, now taking on the responsibility of making sure his entire musical family had a secure home. His decision to help found the CMA was driven by a quiet, private fear that he had carried for years, the fear that the traditions he held so dear, the songs from his mother's notebook, would be forgotten. As he would later reveal in his autobiography, it was an act of preservation, a way to build a fortress around the music that had given him his life. His emergence as a leader and a statesman of the genre did not diminish his artistic output. It seemed to fuel it. Throughout the 1960s, Mac's reputation grew, solidifying his status as one of the most respected and beloved figures in all of American music. His leadership role within the CMA was only the beginning of his transformation from a performer into a true guardian of the flame. Between 1966 and 1970, he took on an immense and challenging new responsibility. He became the manager of the WWVA Jamboree in Wheeling, West Virginia. The Jamboree, often called the Second Grand Ole Opry, was an iconic and hugely important live radio show, a vital institution for country and bluegrass music. To be its manager was to be a tastemaker, a producer, a mentor, and a boss. He was in charge of booking and organizing shows for over 100 artists, from established legends to up-and-coming new talent. It was a role that required a deep understanding of the music, a keen eye for talent, and the diplomatic skills to manage a host of different personalities. The fact that he was entrusted with this position demonstrates the immense respect he had earned from his peers. He was no longer just a singer with a golden voice. He was a leader they could trust to steer the ship. Amazingly, at the same time, he took on another powerful executive role. He became the director of the country music division at his longtime label, Dot Records. He was now on the other side of the desk. The artist who had once waited anxiously to hear if his song would be a hit was now the A&R man, the executive who made those decisions. He helped guide the careers of other artists, most notably the great Porter Wagoner, using his own experience and wisdom to help them navigate the treacherous waters of the music business. This dual role gave him a complete 360-degree view of the industry. It solidified his reputation as not just a great voice, but one of the wisest and most principled minds in the business. To balance a demanding touring schedule as a successful artist with the responsibilities of managing a major live show and directing a record label division would be an impossible task for most. But Mac possessed an incredible work ethic and a quiet, methodical discipline, traits that were likely forged in the daily, lifelong effort required to overcome his physical challenges. He was a man who understood the value of hard work and careful planning. He was constantly building, constantly organizing, constantly preserving. The boy who had once been isolated by his disability had become one of the most connected, influential, and respected figures in the entire industry. He had transformed from a solitary listener into the steadfast protector of the entire musical community he loved. It was a profound reflection of the deep-seated values he had learned as a child. In a world of hardship, you look out for your own and you stick together. As the 1960s gave way to the 1970s, the landscape of American music was once again undergoing a seismic shift. The clean-cut Nashville sound that had dominated the previous decade was being challenged from two fronts. On one side, you had the slick, string-laden productions of countrypolitan artists who were blurring the lines between country and pop music. On the other, the raw, rebellious outlaw movement, led by figures like Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings, was kicking down the doors of the Nashville establishment, demanding a grittier, more authentic sound. For many artists of Mac Wiseman's generation, this was a perilous time. They were faced with a difficult choice: adapt and risk losing their identity, or stay the course and risk becoming irrelevant. But Mac Wiseman was different. He had spent the previous decade not just as an artist, but as a statesman and an executive. He had a unique panoramic view of the industry. He understood the changing tastes, but he also possessed a quiet, unshakable confidence in his own artistic identity. He felt no need to chase trends or to pretend to be something he wasn't. This security, paradoxically, gave him the freedom to become more adventurous than ever before. While many of his contemporaries retreated into becoming nostalgia acts, Mac entered a new and remarkably creative phase of his career. He was a traditionalist at heart, but he was also, and had always been, endlessly curious. He embarked on a series of fascinating and unexpected collaborations that baffled genre purists, but delighted open-minded music lovers. These projects were not desperate attempts to stay relevant. They were joyful explorations, conversations between master musicians who spoke the universal language of a good song. In one of the most intriguing pairings of the era, he recorded an album with the legendary jazz clarinetist and bandleader Woody Herman. On paper, it seemed an impossible match: the rustic, heartfelt soul of Appalachia meeting the sophisticated, complex swing of a modern big band. But when Mac's pure, clear tenor soared over the intricate brass and reed arrangements, the result was a revelation. It proved that his musicianship was so fundamental, so rooted in melody and emotion, that it could transcend genre. His voice was an instrument of such pure tone that it could find its place in any musical context. He also teamed up with the rockabilly guitar pioneer Dwayne Eddy, the master of twang. This collaboration was a celebration of the shared roots of rock and roll and country music. Mac, who had once worked to protect country from the perceived threat of rock, was now engaging with one of its architects on his own terms, finding a joyful common ground between his smooth vocals and Eddie's signature reverberating guitar lines. Perhaps most fittingly, he sang with the brilliant folk singer-songwriter John Prine. This was a meeting of two of the finest storytellers in American music. Though from different generations and with vastly different vocal styles, they shared a profound understanding of the human condition, an ability to find the universal in the particular. Their collaboration was a quiet masterclass in lyrical interpretation. This remarkable versatility was driven by a core belief that had guided him his entire life, the belief in the power of a song, regardless of the box it was put in. He was a lifelong student, always listening, always learning. His willingness to cross genres was his own subtle way of keeping bluegrass, the music of his heart, from becoming a static museum piece. He believed that for a tradition to stay alive, it had to breathe, to interact with the world, to engage in a conversation with other styles. He was not just preserving the past, he was actively ensuring it had a future. But even as he explored these new sonic territories, his commitment to his roots, to the bluegrass community, never wavered. By the mid-1980s, he looked at the landscape and saw a looming problem. Bluegrass music, despite its rich history, its technical brilliance, and its passionate, dedicated fan base, was still not getting the respect it deserved within the broader music industry. It was often lumped in as a subgenre of country, a quaint cousin without its own distinct identity. It lacked the industry infrastructure, the focused lobbying power, the dedicated awards, the unified business front that he had helped build for country music with the CMA nearly 30 years prior. Once again, Mac the Guardian, now an elder statesman, stepped forward. This mission was perhaps even more personal than the founding of the CMA. If the CMA was about saving country music as a commercial genre, this new effort was about saving the very soul of Appalachian music as an art form. In 1986, he co-founded another crucial and lasting organization, the International Bluegrass Music Association, or the IBMA. This was more than just another committee role for him. It was the culmination of his life's work as a protector of tradition. Using the experience and wisdom he had gained from the early days of the CMA, he helped create an organization that would give bluegrass its own home, its own platform, and its own annual celebration. The IBMA established an awards show to honor the genre's best artists, a hall of honor to immortalize its pioneers, and a business conference to help the community thrive professionally. For Mac, this mission was even more personal. Having successfully built a fortress for country music with the CMA, he now saw that his own musical home, bluegrass, was still left outside the walls, vulnerable and often misunderstood. Founding the IBMA wasn't just about preservation. It was about giving the music of his mentors, Monroe, Flatt, and Scruggs, the dedicated sanctuary and platform it rightfully deserved. He was drawing a final protective circle around it, ensuring the music that had first reached him on a tinny radio in rural Virginia would have a respected and enduring place in the world. For a man who had already given so much to the world of music, a man who had never chased the spotlight but had always worked for the good of the community, the final decades of his life became a beautiful and well-deserved victory lap. The industry he had helped to build and preserve finally began to turn its full attention back to him, not just as a singer, but as a foundational figure. The honors he received were not just awards. They were profound affirmations of a life lived with unwavering integrity and purpose. In 1993, in a moment of deeply felt emotion, he was one of the first class of inductees into the institution he had helped to create, the IBMA Hall of Honor. It was a recognition from his musical family, from the pickers and singers who knew the music from the inside out. They were honoring him not just as a singer of bluegrass songs, but as one of the pillars upon which the entire genre was built. In 2008, he received the NEA National Heritage Fellowship, the highest honor the United States government bestows upon a traditional folk artist. This award elevated him beyond a genre star to the status of a living national treasure. It was a validation of his role, not just as an entertainer, but as a keeper of the flame of American folk culture after more than 60 years in the business. For all the public honors, his most profound work was yet to come, drawn not from the stage, but from the quietest room of his memory. But perhaps the most poignant and revealing moments of his later years were not the public ceremonies, but the deeply personal acts of reflection he chose to share with the world. In 2014, at the age of 89, he released what might be his most personal album, Songs from My Mother's Hand. It was a project that brought his entire incredible life full circle. Using the treasured time-worn notebook his mother had kept all those years ago, he recorded the songs she had written down from the radio, the very songs that had been the soundtrack to his isolated childhood. The album was recorded simply, with mostly acoustic accompaniment, letting his weathered but still remarkably pure voice carry the weight of memory. It was the sound of a man sitting on his front porch, singing the songs that had formed him. This wasn't a commercial project. It was a personal testament, a profound act of love and remembrance. He was using his art to process a lifetime of emotion, to pay tribute to the woman who had first opened the door to the world of music for him, transforming a secret private memory into a final public gift for us all. In 2017, at the age of 92, he offered the world one last look into his life, publishing his autobiography, Mac Wiseman, Old Dog, New Tricks, and releasing a companion album called I Sang the Song. In its pages, he reflected on his incredible journey with the same humility and gentle wisdom that had defined his entire character. He offered a simple but powerful self-assessment, a key that unlocks the philosophy of his life. He described himself as a storyteller more than a star. It was a remarkably humble statement from a man who had sold millions of records and stood on the world's most famous stages. He revealed that he had turned down numerous offers from Hollywood and television over the years, opportunities that could have brought him far greater fame and fortune, because he feared that the glitz and glamour would compromise the authenticity of his music and his message. This was not false modesty. It was a genuine reflection of his priorities. His private fear was never about being a smaller star. It was about the potential of the stories and the music being forgotten. He believed that the only true path to being remembered was to stay true to the community and the heritage that had made him. The very title of his book was a perfect summary of his spirit. Even in his 10th decade, he was an old dog who was still delighted to be learning new tricks, forever a student of life and song. Finally, the institution he had co-founded decades earlier, the one that stood as the pinnacle of the world he chose, gave him its highest honor. Mac Wiseman, alongside his old friend Hank Cochran, was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. It was the ultimate acknowledgement, a final official coronation of his status as one of the quiet giants of American music. As he stood there that day, a respected elder statesman, it was the beautiful culmination of a journey that had started on a lonely porch in Cremora, Virginia. The boy who couldn't run and play now had a permanent, honored place among the undisputed legends of the art form. On February 24, 2019, Malcolm Mac Wiseman passed away peacefully in a Nashville area care facility. He was 93 years old. The cause was kidney failure, a quiet end to a long and monumental life. There were no dramatic scandals to recount in his obituaries, no public controversies to dissect. His death was like his life, dignified, gentle, and leaving behind a sense of profound and grateful respect. When you look back on his legacy, you see a life full of remarkable contradictions. A man whose body was confined but whose art was boundless. A man who knew deep personal loneliness, yet brought millions of people together through his music. He leaves behind an incredible body of work, a catalog of songs, spread across more than 200 albums that have become standards of the bluegrass and country genres. But his true legacy is not just in the records he made, but in the life he lived and the community he built. He was a testament to the power of quiet, uncomplaining resilience. He never lamented the hand he was dealt. He never used his disability as an excuse or a crutch for sympathy. Instead, he took the limitations placed upon him and methodically, brilliantly, turned them into his greatest strengths. The final unspoken secret of Mac Wiseman's life may be this. Whilst he was outwardly a masterful community builder, a mentor, and a friend to all, his art was born from a deep, foundational solitude. The polio that confined his body freed his mind. It created a private, quiet space within him, a space where he learned to listen with an intensity that few of us ever achieve. He learned to hear the stories between the notes, the heartache in a simple melody, the shared humanity in an ancient ballad, and he spent the next 80 years of his life sharing what he had heard in that quiet room with the rest of us. He was the ultimate storyteller because he had been the ultimate listener. He used his voice, that magnificent, one-of-a-kind voice with a heart, to build a bridge from his own solitary porch to the entire world, leaving behind a timeless and comforting lesson that the deepest wounds can often produce the most beautiful, healing, and enduring music.